Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today we're gonna catch up on the Twilight of the Republic spoilers. This is part 4. So as usual, I'm talking about these cards like I never played with them, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. This is first impression. So I put the cards in 4 categories: not excited, not sure, good, and amazing. I still haven't rated any card amazing so far. There is no card that I'm 100% confident that it's gonna be like seeing a million play and that's going to completely redefine the meta. I haven't seen any card like this so far in the set, but maybe we'll see one today. I'm going to be ranking a total of 67 cards today, so that's going to be a lot of, it's going to be a long video, guys, so relax, sit down on your couch and grab yourself a good cup of coffee or do something interesting as I'm and with that video in the background, because it's going to take a while. First, we got the Phase 2 Clone Troopers. This is obviously not a card meant for constructed. It's pretty bad. 3-2 ambush for 3. We currently have a 3-2 ambush for 2 in this set if it has coordinates. And we have obviously the 3-1 for 2 ambush. The extra health is very situational. I guess there's going to be a lot of 1-1s in this set, but yeah, it's just completely overpriced. Then we got another filler trooper. I'm kind of disappointed that FFG is doing filler cards in set. I feel like those cards have no other purpose but to simply increase the scarcity of the valuable card in the set. I was hoping that FFG wouldn't do this. In set 1, there were very few cards that were absolutely unplayable. In this deck, there seems to be quite a few of them. This is a 3-2 for 2. There's obviously plenty of 3-2 for 2 in the game with some additional upsides. I mean, yes, it's only it has good traits and it is only heroism, but I still don't think this is going to see any play in set 3. Moving on, we got Sword and Shield Maneuver. This card is interesting. Giving raid 1 to all of your troopers can be nice, and your sentinel 2 units. There's some situation where this card can be very powerful, but you need to specifically have a Jedi in play and a bunch of troopers. It's just a little bit situational, and when you get to play it, it's not really super crazy impactful, so I don't think it's going to see any play. Then we got Mr. Bones. So this card is very cool. So first of all, 3-1 for 1 is just straight out of the bat. It's just good. Any upside beyond this is just a bonus, and its guy has an upside that allows him to deal 3 damage to a ground unit if you have no cards in hand. Needless to say, it's going to be extremely difficult to trigger his effect. Most of the time, I would say. It's going to be incredibly situational. 99% of the case, guys, it's just going to be a 3-1 for 1. But I feel like double red needed some extra unit like this. I think this card is going to be really good in any double red aggro deck, and even in double red, like kind of more mid-range deck, it's going to be good. So it's obviously good with double red Kylo Ren, double red Sabit, that kind of thing. So I think it's a good card. Next, we got Enfist Nest. So, Enfist Nest is one of those 7-drop, very impactful play. She's really good in almost every account. She has very good stat. At 5-7 is just excellent stats. She does have Saboteur, which is nice, but more importantly, she has a pretty impactful when playability. They can return a non-leader ability with less power than this unit to his own hand, so it's going to be a 5 or less. There's quite a few units that are 5 or less that you can bounce when this comes into play. And then, more importantly, she can repeat that effect every time she attacks. So not only she has immediate impact on the board, she also does repeat that effect every time she attacks. So she's the kind of threat that you need to answer. So I think it's a very good card. It has a major inconvenience that obviously our ability is only useful if there's actually a unit in play that you can actually kill with, that you can actually bounce with her. And there are going to be quite a few situations where there's simply no unit in play, or there's no unit with that has those stats. So she doesn't have a legal target, and I think this is going to happen quite often with that card. So it is kind of the big thing, but I think she's so impactful whenever she does have a target that I think she's going to see a lot of play. She also is a 7-drop, so she runs perfectly into the hand double curve, like the old hand double curve into 7. And it's a nice complement if you're running double hand yellow. Now you have something else to play on 7. Before people were playing Phoenix Shen. but I think Fennec, she was a bit too similar to Han, to the Han Reluctant Hero. At least this one, she's very complementary. She does something really drastically different. I mean, yes and no, but I think she's quite good. So yeah, I think she's quite good. And she's gonna see play in that deck for sure. Maybe she should see play in other decks. The fact that she Underworld is also pretty good because there's loads of other Underworld cards. So that means she synergizes with all these Underworld synergies. We'll talk about there's a card that synergizes with Straight that is quite powerful that we'll talk about after, and I think she can be quite good in that deck. Next we got our leader, Captain Rex. So Captain Rex, basically the long story short is like I'm really super excited by his leader deploy, but I'm not excited at all by his leader ability. So leader deploy is pretty exciting. Yes, he doesn't have great stats, but he comes with a two clone troopers that is going to be a 2/3 with him. And in this game, you know there's a massive difference between being a 2/2 and 2/3, and of course the fact that he gives +1 health to all the other troopers is also very relevant. He's a clone Republic trooper, so tons of relevant traits. So I think he's quite good when he deploys. Like he gives you like 4 plus 9. He gives you like 13 points of stats when he deploys, which is pretty impressive, and obviously is it's quite synergistic with the coordinate kind of archetype that we've been seeing. The problem I have with Captain Rex is that, and also he deploys on 5, which is pretty early, which is really most of the competitive leaders in Star Wars Limited deploys on 5 because this is really a key moment in the game. So my criticism to other leader is the action ability. So basically you need to have attack this phase to be able to create a clone trooper with this ability, and you have to spend 2 resources. This is a lot of resources just to get a 2/2 on the board. That is very, very annoying. That's very expensive and annoying. It's an ability that I feel like has been a little bit overtuned. I think it should have costed 1, or either it should not have the restriction of having a friendly unit that has attacked this phase. Because I think one of the main purpose of Captain Rex is going to be trying to repopulate a board whenever you've lost your board, and it's gonna and the problem is you can't even do that, and it's really expensive. So this thing makes me a little bit worried about the leader. We'll see if it's end up seeing play, but I'm not super confident. I feel like the action ability really kills the leader. In my view, in my opinion, at least my first impression is like they've overtuned. They basically made too many restrictions on the ability, and it's going to make it very, very difficult to use. Then we got Shadow Collective Camp, and you know my opinion about those new 25 HP, 24, 23 HP base. I don't like them. They just simply do not provide nearly enough value for the HP you lose. We know now that basically the standard for a base, for a 25 HP base, is to be all around the same power level as Tarkin Town or Energy Conversion Lab. You need to be at least that powerful to justify 5 less HP on your base, because 5 less HP on your base is a massive, massive deal in this game. And this card does not even come close to provide this amount of value, so it's obviously not a good card. I can imagine a world where this card would see play. Let's say you were a combo deck that only cares about that, trying to combo off like a storm deck or something, but I don't think we're gonna see those kind of deck anytime soon in the game, and maybe that's a good thing. So I can imagine some very weird circumstances, like a deck that really plays Star Wars Limited in a completely different way than any other. But it would take at least that much for this card to see play. It's not going to see play anytime soon, in my opinion. Then we got the Confederate Courier. This card is just like the 1/3 that leaves the battle droid when he leaves to play. This card, for the same reason, is going to be an essential part of the new exploit archetype, the ability of a unit to be able to be exploited and leave the body behind so you can exploit again the turn after. This kind of shenanigan is going to be absolutely necessary, I think, for the exploit archetypes to work, whether you're going for an exploit aggro or an exploit more rampy exploit or whatever. So I think this is a good card. Even like just in a pure aggro card, just card that has 2 attack into space and then goes into a droid whenever it dies is is not bad at all. So I wonder if this card will see play outside of exploit, but for sure this card is going to be a necessary component of exploit. It's going to be the necessary enabler early turn to play that you want to have in order to feed that archetype. Then we got the Battle Droid Legions, and I'm not so Battle Droid Legion is kind of cool because he's an exploit that basically gives you droid whenever it gets defeated. That means that one of the worst nightmare for an exploit deck is you get to exploit. You get to put your unit down, and then the unit gets answered, and then suddenly you got nothing else. Well, here this one at least gives you droids behind, unless it gets bounced. So it's not amazing, but it's not terrible either. I think it has a chance to see play if you, but it's going to depend a lot on what are the other options of exploit cards that are going to be available. So if you don't have another choice, I think there's a chance this card might see play, because he has this ability like if you don't answer it, then it's a 6/5. It's a 6/5 for you can get this card for 6/5 for 5. Or you can even get the 6/5 for 3 if you're playing Dooku, and then whenever it dies, it gives you back the droids that you've lost when you exploded them. So I think that can be quite powerful potentially. But I don't know if it's going to be C play, but I think it has chances to C play. Next we got Nute Gunray, and Nute Gunray is kind of the other exploit kind of leaders that we have seen. So we saw Dooku, that allows you to give the exploit to anything. This one allows you to get battle droid to be easier. So if you're 2 or more friendly unit that was defeated, you can create a battle droid for free. That is pretty good. The leader deploy, however, is not super exciting. It deploys on 6, which is kind of a bummer. The stats are kind of weird, and then yeah, you get a battle droid when you attack. That's fine, but I feel like if you pick this leader, it's not going to be for the leader deploy, but rather for his leader's ability. So I give this one a maybe. Once again, it's very hard to know in advance what exploit needs. On face value, I rate Dooku higher, because I think Dooku gives you something a bit more unique, giving you access to exploit on any cards, has a lot of potential combos. And also, Dooku is a much more impressive leader when he deploys, even though he deploys later. And it also, I also believe that exploit is very most likely going to be at least green-black, and then you're going to be choosing your third color, goes green, black, yellow, green, black, blue. While here with Nute Gunray, if we are assuming that the exploit archetype is going to be a green-black, then you have no other choice than to play green, black, blue to play him, which restricts your options by a lot. So we'll see. Maybe there's going to be exploit archetype that are not green-black. We'll see how it goes. But for now, I'm going to give it a maybe. Then we got the multi-troop transport. So it's a little bit similar to the battle droids exploit thing that we saw earlier. That it allows you to. It's an exploit card that gives you droids, but this one is a much slower engine. Like it is cheaper, but the stats are a lot worse. I would much rather have a 6/5 than a 3/6. And it creates the battle droids very slowly. So in my opinion, it is worse. It is significantly worse. So I don't think it's going to see play. I think they're just simply better things to do to play in for exploits, especially in blue. Then we got the Rune Echo. This one is a bit tricky. I think it can be played in Dooku, because Dooku can play it for free and then enable the when play ability, because then you play for free with Dooku because it's separatist, so you get a 3/2 for free that deals -1/-1 something. That can be by just defeating a unit. I think that can be very effective. If you don't get to exploit him, then 3/2 for 2 is okay, but then the ability becomes a little bit more situational, even more situational than it already is, because -1/-1 doesn't really kill much in this game. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a maybe. We'll see how it goes. I think in Dooku it's playable. Then we'll see on other decks if it sees plays in any other decks. Nameless valor is basically those kind of upgrade that can only upgrade tokens. +2/+2 overwhelm is obviously a very good raid, but the fact it can only be used on the token is a pretty big deal breaker. That means, of course, that it's going to restrict the amount of decks that can play it. It means that that you cannot. Usually, you want to put upgrades on very large units to make those units even more difficult to manage, to deal with. Or you want to put them on your leaders, and obviously this card forces you to put this on a token, which is such a big downside. I don't think this is going to see any play. Now we got a card that is a lot more difficult to evaluate. It is now there are 2 of them. So this card basically is kind of a sneak attack, so in the sense that you do cards advantage in order to cheat a card in play, but this time the card basically remains in play permanently, which is obviously a pretty big deal. So here you pay 3, put something that costs 5 or less, so you get basically a 2 resource discount. We know that in Star Wars Unlimited, trading card advantage for tempo, so doing card advantage in order to put things faster in play, has always been a good trade-off. We see this in many cards, and that's why this card is potentially very playable, very powerful. Let's say you open up with a turn 2 underworld unit, and then you go the turn after, you pay this for 3 resources, and then you play a Zuckuss. Like that is just extremely powerful. And it's not that difficult to do, because all you need is to have exactly 1 unit in play. On turn 1, obviously you likely to only have 1 unit in play. Non-vehicle, most units in the game are non-vehicles. And share traits. This one, the third restriction is probably the most difficult to play around, because it means you're really gonna have to be thoughtful about the way you play your deck. But there are a lot of units that have multiple traits. You get, for example, those Vader as the Imperial trait, so any Imperial units works with him. You have Maul with an Underworld, so there's just tons of Underworld units. So you're gonna have to build your deck around this card in order to make it work. But I think if you do so, I think it's gonna be pretty powerful. So I'm not gonna say this card is absolutely amazing. It's like an auto include or anything, because you really have to build around. And even if you do have the right deck for it, at the end of the day, you still need to have exactly 1 unit in play. You need to have that card into your hand with that share the trade with the card in play. There's a lot of restriction that makes this card situational. So I can see this card being super powerful, and I can see this card actually being bad, because just too inconsistent, too difficult to make work of. So we'll see how it goes. I can see this. There's loads of ways you can run this card. I also thought about, like, you go turn 1 Grogu, and then you can go turn 2 the new Anakin Skywalker, 6/6 for 5, that kind of thing. That is just like very powerful. All that kind of thing. It's also a trick, meaning that it's a combo piece that you can actually search from Jabba. So that's also worth noticing, and Jabba will also make it cheaper. So that's kind of cool. There's a lot of things going on to think about this card. It's very difficult to rate it in a vacuum. You really have to test it and build a deck around it to see how powerful it is. I can see this card being bad, I can see this card being good, but I think it's most likely a good card. Next we got Malevolence, and in my opinion, Malevolence is the best exploit unit we've seen so far. It is, so it exploit 4, meaning that you can play this card for 1 resources, and if you're playing it with Dooku, you can even potentially play this card for free. I mean, obviously defeating 5 units is kind of a high cost, but the exploit 4 gives you a lot of flexibility on how you can play this card. I think in order to make this card worth it, you probably have to pay, I think for 5 it becomes good. If you pay any more than that, then you're basically exploiting half of it, like exploit 2 is basically where you're going to be wanting to do most of the time. But then obviously you get a 7/7, it has immediate impact on the game with this -4 counter-attack ability, which I think is quite decent. And then it gives you a 7/7 restore, which is very, very good. So I think this card is really good. I think if there's going to be an exploit deck that's going to be playing blue, 100% is going to be playing this card. And I think I'm even going to go as far as saying that one of the big reasons why exploit blue will be played is because of that card. I think that would be kind of the big selling point on blue. Next we got Obedient Vanguard. While the unit is absolute trash, the ability is situational because you need to have another trooper in play, and that trooper needs to be ready to be able to benefit from the +2/+2. So that's a lot of restriction, meaning your opponent can very choose the moment where you can defeat that unit, but you can't really get the benefit, meaning that this card is pretty bad. Clone Cohort is also pretty bad. Basically, 2 resources for just raid 2 is pretty horrible, and the when defeated ability that gives you a 2/2 is not particularly exciting. So technically you could think this card is like pay 2 to get a 2/2. That just is not good at all. So this card is obviously horrible. Next we got the droid cohort, and pretty much we got used to it, but pretty much every time there is a droid version of a card and you see the equivalent on the clones, the droid version is almost always better. And this card is so much better than the clone. It gives +1/+1 for 1, which is so much better than giving raid 2 for 2. And then when you defeat, you get a battle droid, which is once again much better. So this card is like so much better than his counterpart. I'm not sure if he's going to split. I give it a maybe, but I think it has way more chance of seeing play than the other one. Then we got Wolfpack Escort. 2/1 for 1 is not exciting. It's basically like kind of especially when in this color combination you get a 2/3 for 1 with the cartel cohort. But cartel cohort obviously has the bounty, but the bounty is not super relevant. This one has a win playability though, but that's a return a friendly non-leader unit, non-vehicle to his hands. Extremely situational. Yeah, this card is terrible. There's really much better things to do even in that color combination with what we have. Luminara Unduli is one of those super expansive Jedi with no immediate impact on the game. I mean, this one she does have. She can heal your base for each unit you control. Yeah, you're gonna heal like 3. That's not really amazing for something that costs 7. So very weak impact on the game. 4, 9, 7. The stat, she gets a lot of stats, but then she doesn't really do much. This card is just like a lot of Jedis in this set. She is just way too slow. She's way too slow for what she does. There's a situation where she's not going to heal you almost anything. She will do 1, and that's going to be it. So it's not a good card. And then we got Self-destruct. Overall, I think this card is significantly weaker than Open Fire. I think I would much rather pay 1 more, not having to defeat a friendly unit, and knowing that I can play this card at any time. While this card, you really need to have a unit that you're willing to sacrifice in play to be able to play that. So I don't like the card, but maybe there's a deck out there that can utilize this. Where really you just have so many. Obviously, you're playing a lot of droids to make this happen. Even in a dedicated droid deck, I'm not super excited about this, but at least in this one, it becomes a lot easier to play. So we'll see how it goes, but yeah, not a big fan, but it might be playable. Then we had Quinlan Voss. I was not super hard on this card when it got first released. I was like, hey, this is basically Cad Bane for heroism, and then I thought a bit about more. I thought the card had a lot more going for her. So first of all, the ability is so basically the ability is a little bit more difficult to trigger than Cad Bane, but at least does not put any deck building restriction on you, which I think is very valuable. Another cool thing about this card is the fact that she deploys 1 turn earlier than Cad Bane. I think a 3/7 for 5 is better than a 4/8 for 6, especially when that 4/8 is not a 4/8, it's a 2 raid 2. So I think she has just better stats for how early she comes into play. The fact she comes into play 1 turn earlier is very relevant. And I think the last very good bit of things that's going on with Quinlan is like she's a force unit. So we haven't seen a single force leader available in yellow-white. And I think force, and that's the reason why we haven't seen many force deck focused on yellow-white. But I think that if you're running yellow-white-red, you got your payoff with 4th row in red. And then in yellow-white, you can basically play your force unit. There's tons of great force enablers in yellow-white with Grogu, with what's it called? I forgot his name. Ezra, that kind of thing. That means that you're going to be able to play Quinlan very consistently. That means you can also play. There's 2 of you. You can go for the Grogu/Anakin combo thing with there's 2 of them. That kind of thing. I think and obviously red means that you can play Tarkin Town as well, so you can basically do the ping Tarkin Town synergies with Quinlan. So I think that's pretty cool. There's a lot of stuff going for it. Is that going to be competitive? Who knows? But I think it's at face value, it's pretty good. So good leader's ability and good stats. That I think is enough to make this card good. Play well. Then we got Chancellor Palpatine. Chancellor Palpatine is pretty great. His ability is to make tokens come into play ready, can be pretty powerful. The ability to get the clone troopers when he attacks unit that live in play, extremely easy to trigger with all the exploit stuff, and relatively cheap and hard to get rid of. But the problem is like he's double cunning, and I think it's a pretty big deal breaker in my opinion, is double cunning, because I don't think you can build a token deck on double cunning. I think that if you look at all the token generation, all the exploit payoffs, all those cards are spread across basically 3 colors. That you got green, blue, and if you really want to take the best out of this deck, you're going to have to mix multiple colors. I don't think playing twice the same color is going to deny you so many strong cards that I don't think it's going to be super worth it. So I think the fact that double cunning is a pretty big deal. I don't think the card is good if you play the 6 resource for it. I think it becomes too slow. Another thing I don't like about it is that one of the biggest token generator in yellow-black is the card that gives you like 3 droids, and those 3 droids comes into play ready already. So basically the biggest token generation card in those colors basically don't care about Palpatine, because they already give you token that comes into play ready. So that is kind of a counter synergy that is very weird. So I'm not super confident that this is going to see play, because it has this the card itself is strong, and I cannot exclude that there's going to be a possibility this card is going to see play, but I just think that the double cunning is kind of a deal breaker for the card like this. Oh, I gave you a good. I should have put a fry. Sorry, I would have put a fry on this card. So it's a maybe for this card. Then we got Anakin's interceptor. So Anakin's interceptor is basically, we see people playing Alliance X-Wings that are basically 2/3/4/2s in space that don't have any upside. This one has an upside, but the reason why people play X-Wing is because it's a rebel. That means you can boost it with Fleet Lieutenant, with Wing Leader. So maybe as time goes by, people are going to go away from the Wing Leaders, Fleet Lieutenants. But in this case, I think like the upside is not big enough to give up on the Rebel synergies quite yet. I think Rebel synergies are just very strong, and I think that right now the upsides that this card has, which is +2 attack if your base has 15 damage on it. Another thing as well is, generally speaking, having an upside that depends on what the opponent is doing is not super strong, because it makes it very unreliable. It's very because it's something that is outside of your control. Anything that a card that gets bonus for what the opponent is doing to you makes it very difficult to play, because it really depends on what the opponent is doing. Besides, Anakin Interceptor most of the time is going to be played early on in the game. Later on in the game, you're going to be preferred to play other things, so it's going to be a 2/3/4/2 like the vast majority of the time. I don't think it's going to make it to the Sabine deck, Rebel deck, but maybe if one day the Rebel deck give up on the Rebel synergies, maybe this card would be, of course, an easy replacement. Being on red means that it does trigger Fighter for Freedom, which has something worth noticing. So I'll give it a maybe. Soldier of the 501st. So this guy is just a 1/3 raid for 1. So it's not bad. We're seeing currently in play 2 3s for 1, like the Clone Deserter. This one has Restore, but it also has a bounty that makes you draw a card. And the bounty in this case is, I think, a significant downside. This guy does not have any bounty, and he's almost the same stats. He's a 1/3 raid 1 instead of a 2/3 Restore. So I think this card has a chance to see play, and the fact you can discount him, the fact that you can play him in any double red deck whenever you're playing with Young Han. So you can play this card for 0 with Young Han. So it's another card you can play for 0 with Young Han. So I think this card is quite decent. I think it's in Young Han, I think this card has potential to see play. So I'm giving it a thumbs up. Then we got Sun Heal. This one is very difficult to evaluate. It's a very complicated card. It has this exploit thing that it can be played basically for free, and then the attack ability that allows it to defeat the resource. So I think what's going to happen a lot with Sun Heal is that you're going to be playing it for a very cheap cost by using exploits, and then you're going to be left over with no unit in play, and then the turn after you're going to attack with them, and then you will have no unit you've defeated, because you've basically defeated everything this turn, so you're not really going to be able to benefit from the ready ability. So I think if you're playing Sunhill the normal way, I think Sunhill is pretty bad, because, as I said, it's going to be really difficult to use the ability, because most unlikely you've already exploited a bunch of cards the turn before when you played him, so then the turn after when you attack with him you have no unit that you've defeated, so you're not really benefiting from the ability. However, obviously if you are using ambush on Sunhill, there's plenty of ways to give Sunhill ambush. You got Energy Conversion Lab, obviously, you got Timely Interventions, you got Admiral Piet. In this case, you get to benefit. You get to the exploit and the on-attack ability synergize with one another, because you play the exploit in order to discount the card, and then you get to ready resources, and suddenly you play Sunhill and you actually gain resources by doing so, making the card a lot more powerful. So that's going to be the card, make the card a lot more niche. But I think the only way this card is playable is if you combine it. If you're playing it in green and you combine it with some sort of way to give him ambush. So this card is going to be a maybe for me, so it's going to depend a lot on the synergy. Is that really strong enough to make the card playable? I don't know, we'll see, but it's definitely an interesting card. That's going to be then we got a Tri-droid suppressor. The one playability is situational. The stats are not particularly impressive. The exploits and the cost is very, very expensive, even with the exploits. I think to make this card, even if you get the 2 exploits, and I think there's better things to do for the exploit. So then we got political pressure. So most of the cards in card games that gives your opponent the choice between 2 things, most of the time those cards are pretty bad, and most of the time those cards are very bad. But political pressure might be the exception. The reason I'm saying this is because the discard at random is very, very annoying. Like, if you're playing against this, someone says discard a card at random. If you discard the wrong card, it can completely screw your game. So it's like, it can be extremely powerful. I mean, obviously, sometimes in hand you're like, oh, whatever, I'm okay discarding any of those cards. So there's going to be situations where you're going to be able to wheel in, but most of the time you're not going to be wanting to discard the card at random, which means that most of the time you're going to make your opponent create 2 battle droids. And creating 2 battle droids for 1 is very, very good if you're playing an exploit deck. So I believe this card is probably going to be good enough to be played in an exploit deck. It's not always going to create 2 battle droids, which is a problem, because there's going to be a situation where the opponent is going to be fine discarding a card at random. And once again, the problem with those cards that gives the choice to the opponent is like, your opponent is always going to choose the option that is worse for you, and he does have perfect information to make an informed decision or whether to choose which option is worse for you. So for all those reasons, so I think this card is a maybe. For sure, it's, if he ever sees plays, it's going to be in an exploit yellow deck, and then it's going to require testing to see if it's good or not. But I think it is among the card that gives your opponent choice to see play. This one has probably one of the biggest chance to see play. I mean, I Am Your Father has seen a little bit of play in Spark of Rebellion and might make a comeback in Shadow of the Galaxy. We'll see how next. Prime Manufacturing is a good option to have if ever the token decks needs to, the exploit decks or the coordinate decks need to refill their hands. At least this card exists and is pretty good. Drawing 2 cards for 2 is just a very good rate. You can use the card even if you don't have droids, which is a nice low effect. But yeah, most of the time it's just going to be wanting to be drawing 2, of course. So yeah, so maybe it's going to depend on whether or not those cards need card draw. Keep in mind that in Star Wars Limited, card draw is absolutely not an obligation. It's but there's certain decks or certain matchup in which you might need it. It might be a sideboard card as well. Then you got What Tambor. So I'm not very hard on What. I I think his ability is a little bit too situational, because basically what needs to happen for this to be good is you need to have at least 2 units that are ready, then 1 unit needs to be defeated, then you need to use the ability, then you give a +2/+2 to the other ability. So it's very action intensive, and you need to have 2 units ready in play for this to be useful, because otherwise you give a +2/+2 to something that's not ready, it just doesn't have any value. There's loads of way your opponent can play around it to prevent you from benefiting from that ability. So, and obviously the +2/+2 is only temporary. So yeah, I don't like the ability. I think it's going to be difficult to use, and it's going to be very easy for the opponent to play around. And the other problem with the card is obviously the stats. Is a 3/6 for 5 is just not good stats. We see Han, for example, being a 3/6 for 5. He has not great stats, but Han has such an amazing ability that it really makes up for that. I don't see what tambor having an ability that really makes up for such bad stats. And his ability does not really get any better as he gets deployed, unfortunately. So I don't like him. I don't think he's good. Ooh, this card went back again. Okay. This one, Admiral Trench. Admiral Trench is, I don't think he's very good. Basically, only exploit 1, so best you can do is a 5/5 for 5. Exploit 1, return 3 units that were defeated this phase back to your hand. So the fact that the unit have to have been defeated this phase means that it's very situational. It's very hard going to be to bring back units back into your hand. It's very difficult to be in a situation where there's been 3 units that have been defeated that will come back into your hand. Like you can play this like after a super laser blast. You can play this card after a super laser blast and get the card back into your hand. But here's the thing, then you can just play Emperor's Legions that will do the same for only 2 resources, and then for the other 5 resources you can just play better stuff, because then at the end of the day you get like a 5/5 for 5, which is pretty trash. So yeah, I think it's pretty bad. Also the fact that you cannot get back token units with this card, because token units just disappear from the game. They don't go in the discard pile, so you cannot get back tokens back into your hand with using Trench, which is another deal breaker. So I don't think this card is good at all. Then we got Ahsoka Tano. On paper the card is great, a 3/4 for 3 with 2 relevant trait, Republic Force. Can come to play, kill something right away, and has an ability on top of this. What else can you ask for? The problem with Ahsoka is she only gains ambush if your opponent has more unit than you, and that includes counting Ahsoka herself. That means that you, in a situation where you have no board at all, and you get 1 unit, your opponent has 2 units, then you can play Ahsoka. You cannot do like, oh, my opponent goes turn 1 Battlefield Marine, then me, I just take initiative, play Ahsoka, kill the Battlefield Marine. No, you can't do that. There needs to be 2 units on the other side. So realistically, I don't think you're going to get ambushed with her very often. So yeah, that's the first problem. The second problem is the ability is extremely situational. Like the situation where you would want to pay 2 resources to bring this unit back into your hand with our upgrades is just very situational. So I'm personally not very hot on this card. The 3/4 stat line is fine, but now we have, especially in this color combination between DJ and the liberated slaves, we got 3/5 for 3. So how often are the ability relevant to make up for that 1 extra health? I don't think that often. I think, as I said, the ability is going to be relatively situational. And keep in mind that if you're looking for a 3/4 for 3 force unit, you also have access to Ezra, which has a much more relevant ability, and with also very relevant trait as well. So I think the only way you're going to see Ahsoka single play is if we indeed going to need to see more. If you need more force enablers for the deck that we talked about earlier, the Quinn thing, and then you get to need more force enablers. So she comes into force enablers that comes on turn 2, which is nice. So I don't think she's unplayable, but I don't think she's particularly amazing. So I give it a fry. Next we got Jar Jar Binks. Okay, so Jar Jar Binks is obviously not a card that is meant for competitive players. It's a card that the designers have made as a meme. I think that's pretty much the only explanation I have. So yeah, it's obviously not good. It's just way too unreliable, and even also double cunning is going to restrict tremendously how you're going to be able to play that card. One thing though that I don't like for this card and the design science point is like his ability is going to be so incredibly tedious to resolve. Like having to choose randomly something that happens whenever there's loads of cards into play is going to be a headache. So I just don't. This is just not a very good design in my opinion of a card. From a purely game design standpoint, it's just going to be very weird to resolve. I wish they would have made something a bit more elegant. Also not a big fan of random effect that comes to play much earlier in the game. That happen early in the game because if you get lucky, you can just simply win the game on this. I guess this is intended, but anyway, nobody's gonna play this anyway, so that's fine. Morgan Elsbeth is our next card. So this card is the best way I thought about this card was to compare it to Kanan Jarrus. It's very similar to Kanan in the sense that she's a 4-drop that has no immediate impact on the game, that can restore. It has a similar amount of stats, so it's a 3/6 instead of a 4/5. She has restore 1 instead of the restore 1.5 that Kanan has. But she does make up for this with a nice little ability that can be useful sometimes. But I think the main reason why people are going to be running this card, if ever this card get run, is because she has loads of very important traits. So she is Force, Imperial, and Official. All three of those traits are relevant. I think that's, in my opinion, if ever this card sees plays, is because of because some people like try to run like a Force deck. Or whatever. So I think the traits are really what makes this card potentially playable. She's similar to Kanan. If ever she's going to see play, it's going to be for similar reason than Kanan. So I'm going to give it a maybe. 4-drop with no immediate impact, of course, is a big issue. It's not a deal breaker, but it's not great. So we'll see if she ends up seeing play. Then we got Bold Resistance. So we saw quite a few cards throughout the history of Star Wars Unlimited that you play and then they give you stat boost to units, this temporary stat boost. And among the different cards that can give you stat boost, Bold Resistance might actually be the best of them. So we saw, for example, the one that gives raid 2 for 3, but it's a double raid. This one is not double raid, that's a huge upside. And give +2 attack instead of raid 2, which is also another huge upside. I mean that if your opponent is going to be willing to attack those units that get the stat boost, is gonna have to pay the price for it. There's also, of course, the Assault Delta, which gives also temporary stat boost, but this one is double green, which makes it very awkward to play in a lot of decks. This one is a lot more accessible. The only constraint is that you're gonna have units have to share the same trait, which is not that difficult to do in this set if you build a deck properly. So I don't think it's 100% going to see play, but I think, as I said, among those cards that can give a huge stat boost to all of your units and do a massive alpha strike, I think Bold Resistance is probably one of the best of them, in my opinion. Then we got Poggle the Lesser. So the reason earlier what I said that most likely the exploit decks are going to be green-black is because of all those early drop green-black unit that allows you to populate your boards with droids. And so we saw one earlier with that 2/1 that dies and leaves a 1/1. This one is different, that it allows you to get a battle droid every turn. So Poggle the Lesser is going to be one of the important enablers, and that's most likely the reason why I believe that if you're ever going to be playing an exploit deck, most likely it's going to contain green-black because it needs kind of those enablers. Maybe we're going to see other enablers in other colors that's going to make it playable in other colors, but to me, at least from now, green-black seems to be the primary color in which you're going to be wanting to do those things, and Poggle the Lesser is one of the big reasons for this. Is simply great, just giving you a droid every turn. You get to play something, Separatist Official, 2 relevant traits, and relatively hard to get rid of the board as with this 4 health. So just a good card, very solid card. The only kind of a big downside of this card is like it's not a card that is going to be really. It's a card that you really want to play on turn 1, but then anything later than turn 1, the card becomes a lot worse. But yeah, I think that this card is going to see play in every single exploit deck, and that's a good enough reason to give it a thumbs up. Then we got Satine Kryze. So Satine Kryze is a very interesting card. It is basically a win condition for a control deck based on units. So what I mean by this is like I imagine this card in a deck where you would play a lot of units with high health, low attack, which the green-white has plenty of, that basically try to control the game either by restoring, defeating units, or by being able to restore or sentinels. And then basically you don't kill the incoming is that kind of deck is like it really has a hard time killing because obviously it doesn't have any attack value. But then you play Satine or kryze, and then suddenly you can kill your opponent in a couple of turns with the meal ability, when you can just tap out all of your cards and meal. And whenever it happens, that can meal extremely quickly. So Satine by herself, she meals 3 every time she taps down, but then you put like you can put something like an entrenched hunter. It makes her even more difficult to get rid of. And then when she taps down, she will meal you for 5. So meal for 5 every turn, that's basically like you were playing a vigilance every turn, which is extremely quick meal. So I think it's very, very, this card is very interesting. And I think this card by ourselves can enable like new kind of archetype we've never seen before, which I think is very, very cool. I'm always a big fan of new card that kind of enables new archetypes, because this gives you like a win condition for like those kind of deck. Obviously she's a unit, though she can be defeated, so you're probably going to need some sort of ways to kind of to save her, to protect her, or to have multiple copies of her to be able to play extra copies, or hope that by the time she got killed you got milled enough so you milled enough that you're fine with her dying. But the good thing is like she's gonna kill someone very quickly when she comes into play. So if you have like if you are dominating the board, obviously this is mostly likely going to be in a control deck where you control the board first, and once you got control of the game, then you can play this card, and then you can start milling away your opponent. So a lot of people have been kind of super scared about a card like this. They don't like milling as a mechanic, generally speaking. My opinion on it is that personally I have no problem with milling as long as it's interactive. And the problem is like a mill, and the way it's been implemented in Magic the Gathering before, is that you get those mill cards that can kind of mill out the opponent, and there's not much you can do about it. It's like the same thing as like direct damage. Like this is the reason why I don't like for cause I believing. It's like it's basically kills you and you can't really do much about it. And so people play, but at least with direct damage you can heal yourself, while with meal you can't even heal, doesn't even do anything. So it's really not interactive at all. But in this case it's different, because Satine kryze is a unit, and she also allows other units to get that ability. That means that you most likely you can interact with this, because all you can do is just defeat Satine. Or you can just kill enemy units, so you can attack with your units, you can use your removal. So it's actually pretty interactive. The opponent can really do something to counter this. So I think it's a very well designed card in that sense, that it's meal, but it's interactive meal. So I got no problem with that. Also, something to notice is that the ability is symmetrical. The opponent also get that as well, but I don't think that's going to be very big downside for the card. So I like the card, gives you a thumbs up. Doesn't mean it's going to see play in this set. It might need more support, but for sure it's going to see play at some point. I'll be very surprised that if this card will basically never see play ever. Padmé Amidala is pretty terrible. She's basically kind of a Grogu, but like a much worse version of Grogu. Grogu will exhaust a unit outright. This one only gives you -3 attack. Yes, you can attack with a unit, but since she only has 1 attack, that's not very relevant. And the ability is only turned on coordinate. She doesn't have the force trait, and she is only 4 health. So she's basically like a much worse version of Grogu, and Grogu is like not even that great of a card to begin with. So this card is pretty trash. I don't even know why. What's the idea behind that card? As I said, coordinate card for some reason seem to not be very good, and I don't really understand why the designers are making coordinates so weak, generally speaking. Then we got another very exciting card. That's Yoda. From a pure design standpoint, I'm a massive fan of this card, but in terms of competitive, but we're here to talk about competitive, and let's see how good this card is in competitive. So first of all, the ability is when a unit leaves play. We saw this with Boba. It's a relatively easy condition to trigger. Get to draw a card, put a card at top or bottom. So it's kind of like it's quality card that I think is quite valuable. But more importantly, the fact that you can leave the card on top means that there's loads of synergies, loads of stuff that you can do. Whenever you know what card is on top, there's a lot of cool things you can do with it. One of the most obvious example is You're My Only Hope. You play this card for 3. you get to put a card from the top of the deck. If it's 5 or less, you get to play it. So it's basically kind of, you get a 2 resource discount. It's very similar to there's only 2 of them, but this one does not even need a unit in play. All you need to do is to hope that the unit on the top is the right card that you want to play. And with Yoda, it's going to make this so much easier to do. So Your My Only Hope is the first kind of obvious synergies. There's obviously other cards that benefit from knowing what's on top of the deck. Good example, of course, C3PO. Can C3PO then redraw your card. So basically the card would be a tap 1, draw 2 cards, which is pretty sick. So loads of value you can do from this in kind of a control engine, control/mid-range engine. Pretty cool. That's pretty nice. Is it going to be good enough? We'll find out. How consistent are you going to be able to use this? We'll see. But I think it has a lot of potential. But then the leader deploy is also very strong. In my opinion, Yoda is the strongest leader deploy we've seen on 7. 4/9 stat is immense. It's a lot of stats. Very difficult to get rid of. But then on top of this, you also get a Restore 2, which is also very relevant. You get Force Jedi Republic, 3 relevant traits, and then you got a when deploy ability that allows you to defeat an enemy non-leader that costs the same or less than the card that you discarded from the top of your deck. And obviously, with Yoda's ability, you can actually kind of predict what's going to be the card on top of your deck, and then you can deploy Yoda and get rid of a unit, and that's just so relevant. So a 4/9 Restore 2 that gets rid of a unit when it comes to play, that's as good as it gets. Obviously, it's not always going to kill a unit. It's not 100% ability, but I think it is going to be consistent enough that this card is going to be very powerful. So yeah, immediate impact on the game. That means even if your opponent plays Rival Falls or something like this, you still did something when it comes into play. So yes, he's an expensive leader, but among the 7 drop leaders that we have seen, this might just be the most impactful that we've seen. Like, it is very, very powerful. So we'll see how it goes. I'll give the thumbs up for now. Maybe he plays a bit too fair. Maybe the engine is a bit too difficult to get advantage of. Maybe the meta is just too fast and 7 is just too expensive. There might be plenty of reason that makes this card not good, but on face value, once again, kind of like in a vacuum, I think the card looks really strong. Duchy Champions is the card that's supposed to be combined with Kryze in order to, because it has such a high health, so you can just kind of mill away. But I think this card has multiple problems. First of all, double vigilance means that it's going to be difficult to see this card being played in every deck. So it's going to restrict a lot the kind of deck that can run this card. The fact that it only gets Sentinel whenever your opponent has 3 or more units is a deal breaker in my opinion. As I said, it's very abilities that rely on your opponent doing something to work are very unreliable because you have no control over them. And if the card does not have Sentinel, it is effectively useless. So it's a pretty bad card in my opinion. Even in a Kryze deck, I don't think this card is good. Then we got the card that a lot of people, including me, have been waiting for, the famous unlimited power. And that's the reason why I'm dressed like Palpatine today, so I could do this. Anyway, finally we got unlimited power in a game that's called Star Wars Unlimited. It was something that was bound to happen eventually. But unfortunately, I'm not sure if this card is going to see play. That is a couple of things that are kind of wrong with this card. The first thing is called double red. It's obviously a control card because it can only defeat units. It cannot deal damage to base whatsoever. It's only damaging units, so it's obviously a control card. It's quite expensive. Comes at 6, and it is double red. So first thing is that it's a controlled double red card, and the problem is that double red has me most likely aggro or at best mid-range, but not really controlled so far. So that means there's no home for that card, at least as we know now. And designing a double red control deck seems to be very difficult, at least for now. Maybe in the future that will be possible, but for now it seems very difficult. Another thing is, you can play this out of aspect, but then you're just better off playing Super Laser Blast. The fact that you have to deal 4 damage to a unit, 3 damage to a second unit, 2 damage to a third, and 1 to a fourth. That means that it's not really going to kill that much stuff. It's going to kill 2 units, kind of at best. I mean, against token, it can kill more than that, I guess, but the fact that you have to split the damage between units like this, instead of, you cannot stack up those damage on some unit, like you could just deal 4 and then 3 to finish off that unit and 2, means that it's a lot less flexible than something like Palpatine himself, or even Overwhelming Barrage. So the card is not flexible to use at all. And that's a lot of issues. So my opinion about this card is like, I think it might see play if a double red control deck ever becomes a thing, or even you play like a double red mid-range deck. I could see this card seeing play, but other than this, I don't think it's gonna be that good. So I give it a maybe. I'm not 100% sure this card is gonna see play, which is a shame because really this should be an iconic card. Then we got Republic Defense Carrier. This card is pretty bad. Basically, its cost depend on the amount of unit your opponent controls. So once again, it's you relying on your opponent to do something to be able to reliably use this card. And even if you opponent, in order to make this card worth it, I think this card needs to cost 6. Any more than 6 and the card is not worth it. That means in order to make this card be a decent cost, it needs to cost, your opponent needs to have 6 units in play. 5 units in play, sorry. That's a lot of units. So I think this card is way too unreliable. Then if it's a 6, I guess you can come into play, kind of block a fire spray, which is very nice. But then it's very situational. There's certain decks in which a 6/7 Sentinel is simply just not really good at all. So I don't like this card. I don't think it's good. And I'm a bit sad because we've been waiting for a strong late game card for green-white for a very long time now. For a very long time, we've been stuck on just having Om1 as a top curve for green-white. Especially for my hand deck, I've been looking forward to a strong green-white late game card, and it doesn't seem to be coming. We got Republic R170 as a 3/4 for 3. Those kind of vanilla cards are difficult to evaluate in the vacuum. It's going to depend on the meta. Are we in a meta where being a 3/4 in space is very good? If it is, then this card has potential to be played because 3/4 for 3 is a good sight line. Right now, we have 3/4s that have upside, but those upsides are not super massive, like a punishing one. For the most part, is a 3/4 for 3. Sometimes you get to untap and attack with him, but most of the time it's a 3/4 for 3, and it does see play. And this one is green, so it can be played in any deck. So I think it has potential to be played in. I don't think it's amazing, but it can be played. Then we got the Subjugator Starfighter. So 3/3 embers for 4. Once again, it's also kind of a meta call. Is there going to be like a lot of 2/3s in space in the meta? If so, then this card comes to play, kills something, stay on the board, and gives you battle droid tokens. We already have like a 3/4 for 4 ambush. 3/4 is significantly better than 3/3, but this one gives you battle droid tokens. So if you're playing an exploit deck, this might be good. So I think this could be playable as a sideboard card or as an anti-space, as a meta kind of card in a specific exploit deck as a way to get some battle droids and stabilize the space arena at the same time. So this could be a way for exploit deck to get a better matchup against aggro as well. So for this, it's playable, but it's going to depend a lot on the meta. Next, we got Encouraging Leadership. Give +1/+1 this phase to all the friendly unit. It is a lot worse than the +2/+0 that we saw earlier. It's much better to give +2/+0 to something than +1/+1, especially when the +1 health is temporary, meaning that at the end of the turn, when you lose that health bonus, the unit dies. So it's something that we've seen. It's a trend. We've seen this in so many cards in Star Wars Limited card that gives temporary health bonus are just not very good. And they're kind of balanced as if it was like a significant upside, and I think that's a mistake on the designer's part to think that this bonus is actually significant while it's not really. Then we got a 2/3 Overwhelm for 2. 2/3 stat line is terrible. Overwhelm is horrible on a card that only has a low health. I mean, obviously you can boost the card to take advantage of the Overwhelm, but even then that's not good. This card is also horrible. It's like a 1/4. Like, compare this to Grogu that can exhaust units of any size for free. This one has to pay 2. It's like, and if you keep in mind, Grogu is not even that good of a card. This card is horrible. I don't even know how you would want to. Yeah, the exhaust effect is insanely, it's situational and very expensive. Yikes. B1 Security Droid Team is kind of nice, a 3/1 Sentinel. For 2, I can see a meta where this could be pretty good. We saw like those 2-3 for 2 that saw a lot of play in set 1, but most likely the reason why Paxton saw a lot of play because of the combination with Kira, the fact that Kira could give it a shield. In this case, if we see a lot of droids in the meta with a lot of 1/1s for 1s, then the card is going to be a lot worse. But if we don't see a lot of 1/1s, depending on the meta, I think this card could be good. It's going to depend on the meta, but I think this card has potential. In Pursuit, so exhaust effects are typically not that good. This one costs 0, and if you and so if you have some small tokens that you can exhaust to take advantage of this, I can still see play. Obviously, it's quite situational. You need to have a unit of your own. You need to have an exhaust unit that you're willing to exhaust, and then it needs to the fact that it costs 0 needs to be a significant upside. So there's a lot of things that needs to go on for this to be good. I think it's unlikely to see play, to be fair. Not completely unplayable, but I don't think it's good. It's good enough. Droid Starfighter. Saboteur is a pretty bad keyword in space because obviously in space it's less likely, to be relevant, but Saboteur is specifically bad on such a weak body. As a 1/2 is terrible. This card would be so much better if it was a 2/1 because suddenly you can trade with those 7th Street Defender or those TIE Phantoms, that kind of thing. As a 1/2, it's just really bad. It's really bad. As a 2/1, it would probably be just strictly better than TIE Fighter, which would be awkward. But yeah, this card is 1/2 sideline is just pretty horrible, even in space. And the Saboteur keyword is completely irrelevant on such a weak body. Then the Super Battle Droid 4/3/3. They're just, I know it's a separatist card, droid trooper, so he has a lot of relevant traits. But I think that if you're going to be running, there's just so much better things to do in this game than playing a 4/3/3. The moment where 4/3/3s were relevant is way past. Like, we're way past that point where the game has grown to an extent where there's just so much better things to do. And now we can play things like Toro, which are 3/5/3 with upsides. This one 4/3/3 with no upside, so obviously not meant for constructed. Grievous Wheelbike. Without Grievous, this card is horrible, way overpriced, +3/+3 overwhelm, not relevant. If you're playing it on Grievous, it becomes a lot stronger. So +3/+3, is that really going to be enough for the card to see play? I think it's very unlikely. So I personally don't find Grievous to be particularly strong. Grievous as a 4/4/3 is a lot more interesting, but I think you have to be playing the leader Grievous to make this consistent enough. So I don't think it's very good. I just give it the benefit of the doubt just in case Grievous sees plays, but even if his play is not even guaranteed. So to be honest, this might be a little bit generous. Maybe it should be a nah. Maybe. Okay, Battle Droid again. Sorry. Okay, Droid Deployments. Love this card. Yeah, just put 2 droids for 2 resources. Obviously, this is an exploit enabler. It comes into play right away from turn 1. Allows you to do crazy exploit shenanigans on turn 2. I think it's the only card in the entire game that allows you to put 2 bodies on turn 1 unconditionally. I could be wrong about this. You can play 2 turn 1 play, I guess. But yeah, for 1 card being able to do this, it's black, so it's going to be played on a wide variety of decks. So I think it's pretty good. Then we got the Mercenary Contest, which is basically a worse version of Power of the Dark Side. It is it's worse in 2 ways. You cannot defeat leaders, which is a pretty big deal. And you also have to defeat one of your own units if you happen to have a unit in play. So all those makes this card significantly worse than Power of the Dark Side. But a bad version of Power of the Dark Side is still a very strong card. Power of the Dark Side is still today the best single target removal in the game. Mercenary Contest also is not blue-black, it's only black, meaning that it can be played in a wider variety of decks. So for example, in your red mono control red deck, you now can have a removal that can kill units of any size, which is very valuable. So it's going to make it maybe possible to play a control deck without blue. Maybe. So I don't know. I don't know if it's going to see play, but it has it's a powerful effect. And I can also see Control Deck be willing to have more than 3 copies of Power Dark Side. So it's a good card. I don't think it's gonna be seeing play 100%, but it's definitely a good card. Then we got Eta Light 2 Interceptors. This card is absolutely horrible, so overpriced. 5 resources for a 3/4 Restore 2. Keep in mind that we do have a 4 cost 3/4 Restore 2 with an upside, and nobody sees play. That's called the Razor Crest. The Razor Crest is basically all this for 1 less with an upside, and it doesn't see play in Constructed. So yeah, this card is horrible. I have no idea why the designer collects. I mean, granted, it's only white and not white blue, but still. Next, we got ATT Vanguard. This card reminds me of Reinforcement Walker, but Reinforcement Walker has a huge advantage over this card. It's like Reinforcement Walker has an immediate impact on the game as it comes to play. Comes to play and allows you to restore 3. Also, you get the option to restore 3 or draw a card, which is a significant upside. Doesn't have the when defeat ability that gives 2 clone troopers, but I think having an immediate impact on the game is far more relevant than this. So yeah, it is basically a worse version of Reinforcement Walker. Granted, it can be played in any heroism deck, but yeah, honestly, I'm going to say it out loud. If heroism decks are forced to be to play that card because they have no better late game, that is very, very sad. Not good. Ahsoka's Padawan's lightsaber, +2 attack for 1 that is permanent, is actually pretty good by itself. Among the different lightsabers, this might be one of the best one that can be run even if you're not Virgin Ahsoka. So that's something that is worth noticing. The Ahsokas that we've seen, so the leader and the units, are not particularly good in my opinion. They're not particularly good. But I think that but as I said, this card is playable even on a deck that doesn't run Ahsoka. Is it going to be played over DL44 blasters? I doubt it, but therefore the blasters has to be played in a yellow deck, while Ahsoka can be played in any heroism deck. Ahsoka Padawan's lightsaber. So I think it's a maybe for this card. As I said, it's not so much better on Ahsoka, but it is quite good on anything, because the +2 attack permanent for 1 is not bad, even though it cannot affect vehicle, which is a significant downside. But moving on, we got the Drop In, which is basically the clone version of the card we saw earlier. And this is this card is an embodiment of what is wrong with the balance team right now, with the balance team between the coordinate and the exploit. So the dev seriously think, I'm going to go a little bit on a rant here. The devs really think that putting 2 1/1s for 2 is the same as putting 2 2/2s for 4. I'm sorry, but if that's really what the devs think, then they have a fundamental misunderstanding of the game. I'm gonna say it right away. Like I'm sorry to be that, but if the devs seriously think that because the clone troopers are 2/2 instead of 1/1s, then the cost of the card has to be twice more expensive. If they really think that, then they have a fundamental misunderstanding of their own games. Because obviously whenever you're playing a card like this, a token generator, you don't really care about the stats of the units. What you care about is enabling exploits, enabling coordinates, that kind of thing. So the body themselves are important, not the stats on the units. So obviously 2/2s are better than 1/1s. Nobody is denying this, but it's not worth twice more. We're talking about a card that costs 2 and now it costs 4. And I think I understand why coordinate is completely miscalibrated if this is the case for the entire set is like this. Coordinate seems to be, I don't know, I just don't understand what's going on with this. In any case, this card is trash. It's basically way too expensive. Those 2/2/4/2s are not going to do much. They're going to be easy to kill. And it's just way too big of an investment for the value that it brings. And yeah, so I don't like it at all. Next, we got Pre-Vizsla, which is a card that I really like. Really like the design of this. It's basically, so there's a couple of cool things. So the ability is quite situational because you need to draw cards on top of the one that you draw for every turn. So this does not include the card that you draw from the regroup phase. So for the regroup phase, so that means you need to draw cards on top of the card you draw. We know that generally speaking, Star Wars Limited card draw is not very good, but the good thing is like Red has access to a lot of card draw that can be pretty powerful. So that means that you can use this as a way to remove. So, and then once this leader is deployed, he's actually very strong because he comes to play 4/6 for 5 with Saboteur. That is very good just by itself. Like it's almost like a Boba level of power, right? 3 or more cards in hand, very easy to do. So this card is pretty much Saboteur almost permanently. And then if you got 6 or more cards in hand, which is not that difficult to do for a leader that encourages you to draw a card, then you got basically on your hand a 6/6 for 5 Saboteur for 5, which is super, super damn powerful. So the leader deploy is very, very impactful. Like the amount of stats that you get for the price you're paying is pretty incredible. And the ability is not bad. So let's say there's so you're going to be, one of the best example for this is probably like I Am Your Father. You play I Am Your Father, you get something, you kill something that costs 7. Your opponent decide to make you draw a card. Well, cool. Then you can just pay 1, tap down, and then you can deal 3 damage to something, which is very strong. Like deal 3 for 1. There's obviously plenty of ways to draw extra card, and this card becomes effectively like a ping. So I like this leader. I think this could be the next hard control leader if you're going to be running a blue, black, red deck, and you put a lot of card draw in your deck, and so you have like a leader ability that is effectively a removal, so you can draw card and kill units on the same turn, and then you deploy with a 6/6 Saboteur on at 5. That's pretty strong. So I think this leader has potential, has a lot of potential. I think it's a pretty cool leader, and I'll give it a thumbs up. Next, we got Brain Invaders. So Brain Invaders is so that's not the guy that is on the picture. It's actually the brainy thing. So this thing is very interesting. So obviously 2/4 for 4 is pretty bad stats, but the ability can be very powerful. There are certain leaders that depends a lot on their leader's ability. I'm mostly thinking about Young Han or Old Han. Those are leaders that really depend a lot on their abilities. And if you can kind of like turn off their abilities, that can really give you a significant advantage. So obviously you need to, this ability is symmetrical, so it also affects your leader as well. So you need to be running a leader that does not care about his leader ability being turned off. But if you can make this happen, then the leader can, the card can be pretty powerful. In my opinion, is most likely going to be a sideboard card, a card that you can be siding in a specific matchup. It's a cool option to have in the game. It might be a little bit overpriced, but for the most part, it's going to be coming into play before the opponent can come into play. And for that reason alone, that is pretty effective. So I'm going to give it a maybe. And then last but not least, we got our Count Dooku. Count Dooku is a very, very effective exploit payoff. It has obviously Separatist and Force, which is 2 very relevant traits, especially when you're in red. That means you can enable Force Throw. It is Separatist, meaning that you can it can be used with the Count Dooku leaders. So with Count Dooku leaders, you can give it exploit 3. That means you can potentially play Count Dooku for 2 resources. So 2 resources, you get a 6/6 overwhelm, and when play, it gets to deal damage to an enemy unit equal to the power of the exploited units. So that would be a minimum of 3 damage if you exploited 3, but sometimes it can be way more than this. When you exploit larger units, you can deal more damage. I think this is so. It comes into play. It has immediate impact on the game. It costs it costs you to exploit some units to put it into play, but I think for what you're getting, it is well worth it. Count Dooku, in my opinion, is the best exploit payoff. So we got the best exploits in blue, which was the Malevolence. This is the best exploits payoff in red. One thing, I think the thing that is a bit of a bummer on this card is that so far, most of the good exploit cards have been either in blue or green or yellow, not in red. red has been kind of the weakest color so far for exploit. So it cannot really be combined with all the other great exploit stuff that we're seeing. So in the exploit deck, it seems like there's going to be like a million different ways of using exploits in this set. And you're going to have to choose your weapons. But Kondoku is, in my opinion, as far as we are seeing, is the best reason to be playing exploits in red. So if you're going to be using exploit in red, it's definitely going to be for Kondoku. So I'll give it a thumbs up. I'm not going to give it like an amazing, because it is still an exploit at the end of the day. You're still going to have to build your deck around it in order to run it. I don't think it's a card you can just simply run in any deck, because in most decks, having to kill your own unit is just too big of a downside. But I think in an exploit deck, this card is incredible. And that's it for today. I've run through, I've caught up on almost all the cards that I've seen. So we've seen quite a few strong cards. And something that makes me very happy is that we've seen a couple of cards that makes me want to build deck that are not exploit. Right now, the only real deck that kind of had the potential to be competitive was the exploit deck. After seeing the spoilers we had today, there's going to be other ideas that pops into my head that makes me want to build decks that are potentially pretty competitive, that are not exploit decks. And that's really good, because so far I was like going to be like, yeah, well, what are we getting from this set? And this set, and now it seems that there's a lot more stuff going on. There's definitely going to be a lot of interesting things coming out from the card that I've reviewed today. So once again, with the amount of card I've reviewed today, I probably missed a lot of things. So feel free to tell me what I've missed, if the things you disagree or the things you agree with, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as usual, if you like that kind of video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.